Well, thank you for taking a look at our map. I'm Katie Carpenter. I'm the State Director of New York Agriculture in the Classroom, and welcome to our virtual field trip to Rocking Horse Farm today. We have been to Rocking Horse Farm before, quite a few times before. Our friend, our farmer, Miss Julie, has invited us and welcomed us to her home and her farm multiple times. And what's really extra special, the first time New York Agriculture in the Classroom ever did a virtual field trip is with Miss Julie. She pioneered it with us. We have lots of fun whenever we're with her, but we're usually there in December talking about our Christmas trees. And we always said, how fun would it be if we showed all the other hard work that goes into having a Christmas tree farm, not just in December? So today we get to talk with Miss Julie about not only Christmas trees and planting Christmas trees, but also about lots of other things she has that are exciting on her farm. And I'll let her tell you all about it. But before we do that, I want to remind you, we want to hear your questions during the virtual field trip. Use the Q&A box. The Q&A box is the perfect place for you to put your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. You won't be able to use the chat box, but you can use Q&A. So with that, Miss Julie, we're so happy to be with you.
Thanks for coming out. Happy to have you.
Tell us a little bit about Rocking Horse Farm in case some of our friends haven't been with us before.
Well, Rocking Horse Farm, as you know, is located in Jamesville. We started the farm back in 1988. There was nothing here when we moved here. It was an old dairy farm. We have specialized in Christmas trees and an apple orchard. We also raise alpacas on the farm, which we use their fiber and we'll talk about. And 7 years ago, we put up an event barn. So we host a lot of weddings and parties during the summertime. So this is part of the operation. We've got Christmas tree field over here, and the west field is across the pasture. So we've got two different fields for Christmas trees. And we've got an orchard, which is over to my left. And we'll see all this stuff and talk about it.
Wonderful. Let's start with Christmas trees. Tell us a little bit about the Christmas tree life cycle. We know we cut them in December, but what else happens throughout the year?
Well, this is, as you can see, our field, and the Christmas trees. As you can see, these are ones that were not cut last year, but they are ready to cut at any time. They're 8 to 9 foot trees. The tree cycle starts now. We put in baby trees every year, and this is the size of the tree when we plant it. This is a 3-year-old little seedling tree. And we buy them from a nursery who specifically grows baby trees because they're kind of difficult to grow when they're little teeny, and it saves us time to buy them when they're this size, and they have a better survival rate when we put them out in the field this size versus a little teeny one that's only 6 inches tall. So these are called actually transplants. They've spent some time in a seedling bed as little teeny babies. Then they're moved into another bed, spread out a little bit so they can get some room to grow. And then these are called transplants. So they're a little bit bigger. What we do is in this field, we are planting wherever a tree came out of. So we're interplanting. We're planting in between the other trees, which is done one at a time. We have another section of field out there which was planted all mass at one time, brand new field. So we have an attachment that goes on the back of our tractor. This is one of our tractors here that goes on the back, and two people sit on it. If you look up a Christmas tree planter, you can see a picture. It's pretty cool how it works, but we can get a lot of trees in the ground at one time in a short period of time using a tractor that way. But this is interplanting. So what we do is we take, this is called an auger bit. It's like a big drill, and it goes on our mini excavator, and we actually drill a hole in the ground. And if you'd like to see that, I'll do it for you. Would you like to see that?
I think they would.
Okay. This makes life a lot easier for us on the farm. We can take, and with it, we can make it turn like so, and it looks like a big drill. And I'll make a hole over here near the other one, but I'll end up just filling it back in because I don't need to. I've already drilled a hole, but we'll put it down. And down it goes for the depth that I want. And then I'll pull it out. And I have a nice hole in the ground there. So
Very
that
nice.
makes our life a lot easier
How
these
do you
days.
know how deep to go, Miss Julie?
Well, it depends on the root system. Now, this is how we receive the trees. These are called bare root. They come to us with no soil on them. This is what their root structure looks like. This is where the ground would be. This is obviously below ground, and this is above ground. So we get them this way. It makes a lot cheaper to ship them bare root because it's a lot lighter. You're not shipping dirt. And these guys right now are what we call dormant. They're sleeping. They've been asleep all winter, and it won't be until we get consistent amount of warm weather that they'll come out of dormancy, or what we call break bud. These are this year's new growth, just waiting to open up and grow. This was last year's growth. So these guys will put out branches just like this. And this is called a whorl. So it will get one of these every year. And this is how much it grew last year. Once these guys get in the ground and established, they'll grow a little bit more, about a foot a year. So then we take them. This is the hole that we've dug. We make sure the roots go nicely down into the hole, because roots don't survive above ground. And we keep that soil level right where the roots start, right at our soil level. And then we fill in. It's a little difficult to fill in now because the soil's turned to mud from yesterday's rain. But we'll pack the soil around them, making sure they're straight. And voila, it is planted, ready to grow this year. So that's how they start. Then we'll let them grow. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Miss Julie. Would this be a job you do all by yourself, or would you have help?
I have help come in. We have a team of about 3 or 4 of us. My husband works with me on the farm too. He likes to drill all the holes. Sometimes I do them, but we have drill all the holes, and then a team will follow and we'll get all the planting done. Probably we put in 1,200 trees this year, and it took us about 4 days to do it with a team of 3 to 4 people.
Wow, 1,200 trees planted in 4 days. Pretty amazing.
Yep. Machinery helps a lot. So then we'll let them grow for 3 or 4 years. We really won't do much with them. These are some spruce trees that were put in, I think, 5 years ago. So they're really taking hold now. You can see this was last year's growth. This was that whorl that we talked about. So this is how much growth it put on in 1 year. So these will continue to put on about 12 inches every year. When they get to be about this size, we'll start trimming them to make them look nice and full. Because if you don't, they'll be very open and airy. So we'll come in and we might just snip the ends of some branches that are sticking out a little too far. We want a nice upside down ice cream cone shape. So that's what we're looking for when we shear them. This guy over here has got a pretty nice shape to it. It has been sheared for a number of years and it's nice and thick. These are different kinds of trees. We've got spruce and fir here on the farm. This is a Serbian spruce. This is a Colorado blue spruce. We also have white spruce and a few Norways on the farm. And so they're very different. You can see different in their needle pattern, different in their coloring. These got green on top, and the bottom is nice and white, similar to a fir. And we also have some Canaan firs and some Fraser firs here on the farm.
Now, Miss Valendik's class wants to know, speaking of trees, what is the most popular Christmas tree that you plant on your farm?
Probably, I would say the Canaan firs are the most popular. but we sell a lot of different stuff, and it's in the eye of the beholder. It's what they like.
So you mentioned to us that you get the bare rootstock in and you plant the trees. We have a classroom that wants to know, do you ever plant them from seed? Do you start them yourself at the farm?
No, no, it's a little trickier to do that. And that's pretty much done at nurseries that just do that in greenhouses. So no, we let somebody else do that part of the work.
Mrs. Shell's fourth grade class was wondering, and Chase specifically wants to know, what would happen to the small trees if there was a storm?
These guys are pretty hardy, and nothing seems to really bother them. They're short enough that the winds and the snow loads aren't going to bother them. It's when you get a really, really tall tree as they get them to have some issues if we have a bad storm. But these guys, they're zone hardy for this area, so they can tolerate the cold temperatures that we have. And yeah, they can handle it just fine.
We're getting lots of questions about how many years does it take to grow a Christmas tree? And there are some pretty big Christmas trees behind you. So about
There
how old
are.
are those trees?
These trees, this guy, they grow about a foot a year. So this tree is probably about a 10-year-old tree, maybe a little more. Um, most Christmas trees that you get that are about 8 feet are about 9 to 10 years old. So that's pretty much how long it takes to grow them.
And Danny from Mrs. Shell's fourth grade class, she was wondering, do you have to wait for a certain temperature or a certain type of weather to plant your trees?
We like to put, they need to go in the ground while they are still dormant or sleeping. Once they break bud and start growing, they're going to go through a lot of transplant shock because they're trying to get their new branches out. If you get them in the ground while they're dormant like this, then they can concentrate on getting their roots in the soil and established before they have to start pushing out growth.
Now, Miss Julie, Christmas trees are not the only type of trees you have on your farm. What other types of trees do you have?
We have an apple orchard, which is all over in this section. We have to take a new count, but I think about 15 different varieties of apple trees here. And it's primarily a you-pick operation. People can come out and they can pick their own apples, and they buy them by the pound. So it's a fun family event to come out and pick apples, fresh apples right off the farm. We are a sustainable orchard. We use organic practices. So that's a good selling point for us, and something that I have a passion about.
And when you have fruit trees or apple trees, could you tell us how many different varieties of those apples you might have on your farm?
Well, there's hundreds of different varieties. I've chosen about 15 different varieties for things that I like, things that are a little more disease resistant because apples are very prone to certain diseases. So there's some newer varieties that have been bred to be more disease resistant. So that means less spraying for me, which I still do spraying. Organic, you still spray, but the things that you spray organically are natural occurring substances, not man-made. So for example, copper and sulfur are very good fungicides. So we'll spray them early in the spring to help prevent some of the apple scab diseases from infecting the trees. Unfortunately, apples are a pretty high maintenance tree, but they do taste good.
Could you tell us a little bit about the life cycle? Do you plant new trees every year? And if so, how do they come? And then what happens?
We do. Do you want to walk down this way or okay, we'll do that next. We get them as what are called whips. They're a single stalk of a tree, and they are a variety of tree that is really good to eat, like your favorite Red Delicious or Macoun or Honeycrisp. And then they graft them. They put two trees together. They put a rootstock of a tree on a good variety of tree. And what that causes is a graft. And this older tree, this big nodule right here, this is where this tree was grafted together. And the reason for that is when apple trees are bred for their special taste, like the Honey Crisps and the Snapdragons and all those favorite ones we have, what they didn't breed into them was good root stocks. So they circumvent that by putting them on an older variety of rootstock that's a really strong rootstock, but doesn't produce very good apples. So by joining them together, you get a good rootstock that will feed and supply all these delicious good apples with the amount of water and nutrients that they need that their normal roots would not be able to provide. And they do that with your grafting tape. They'll take a small a small stem, and there's a special way to do it. I don't do it because it's kind of an art and I've never tried it. But then they'll put the two together and they'll wrap them up with this tape. And after a couple months, if the graft takes, they'll actually grow together as one unit.
Very interesting. And so if you were eating your favorite Honey Crisp or Cosmic Crisp or Snapdragon apple, and you wanted to take one of those seeds and plant them in your backyard, would you get an apple? Would you get that same apple?
You will not, because who knows where the pollen came from for that flower when the bees are always visiting everything else, and another tree might have pollinated this Honey Crisp or whatever. So you will not get the exact same variety. If by chance you did, and all my rows are the same variety, and the bee went from that one to this one and pollinated it, and I got a true Honey Crisp, and you grew it, it would be a Honeycrisp tree, but again, its roots are not going to be strong enough to support that tree. So that's why that they are grafted.
What's some of the maintenance you have to do on your apple trees? We think about apples, we think about the fall, and we think about going to pick our own apples or getting them from our favorite roadside stand. But what do you have to do outside of the fall to make sure you have a good crop of apples?
Well, we have to prune them every year. And in the wintertime or late spring, early spring, we want to do it before they're growing. We need to prune them. So I'm coming in here and I'm taking out, depending on how I want to grow my trees. And there's different ways to grow them. Because I'm a U-pick orchard, I want everything to be fairly accessible to people picking. So I have a very broad open tree. I take out crossing branches. I take out any dead wood. I do some thinning because if you have a lot of apples on one tree, they're all going to be smaller than if you have fewer apples. All that same energy goes into fewer apples than a gajillion apples. So the fewer apples, the bigger apples. So we have to do some thinning. I use a variety of tools for that. My favorite one is just a simple pair. These are dirty because I've been out working with them, but a pair of hand pruners. I don't go anywhere on the farm without these because I always see something to prune. If I need something a little bigger bit branch, I will use, these are called loppers. They'll cut a little bit bigger. I have a new special tool, which makes my job a lot easier, which is a battery powered pruner, which saves a lot on my hands.
Those are very cool, Miss Julie.
Yes, they are very cool. I love new technology. And then if we have a bigger branch, I'll take, this is a very, very sharp saw, a very good quality one, which I can cut things like 2-inch branches. I can cut them out. Easy to just clip to my belt. I'm walking around. I've always got it with me. There's a tree, might not need them all the time, but when you need it, you need it. So I carry all of these two and these throughout doing the whole orchard. I use these now more than this is the old style. This is El Manuel labor for those. They're a little bit tough on my shoulders, so this makes life a lot easier for me. So I may come around and where was that tree over here? There was a crossing branch I just saw, which I don't want to leave. So for example, do you see this branch right here is touching this one? This is going to basically open up a wound on that because they're constantly rubbing. So I will trim that out. And now I've got room in there for them to grow. I typically try to do this a lot earlier. We're all done pruning now. I just missed this. Sometimes you do. We get it all done before the trees start to grow and it warms up, because the warmer weather brings out diseases. And we want our trees to have time to seal over their end cuts before the diseases come out. And it takes about 3 days for them to seal up these ends and not let stuff in. So we get that done while it's cold weather before they start growing. Now, they are breaking bud right now. So that is actually a very young flower cluster in there, just waiting for some warm weather to come where it will open up into some nice light pink, beautiful flowers. Then the bees will all come running around and say, hey, there's food. And they help us to pollinate, which then produces the apples on the trees. So that's done in, all the pruning's done in winter or early spring. Then the rest of the time, I will be doing some spraying for the diseases and insects. And in the meantime, then most of what we're doing is mowing these rows. There's a lot of mowing that goes on out here because we like to keep the grass down and keep it neater. That keeps weed competition down for the plants. So that is kind of that.
We have some great questions. Class 231 wants to know, how much space do you need to have in between the trees when you plant them?
This particular orchard, we're putting the trees 10 foot apart, 20 feet between the rows. Now there's, if you look up high density plantings, which is a newer way of growing, they'll have them much tighter, about the trees 3 feet apart, and they're all grown up trellises, and they basically trim them to be a wall of apples. It is more productive that way. I had already put my whole orchard in by the time that came around, and I said, I'm not going to go back and do something different. So, but a lot of the newer orchards are going to this high density planting, which is pretty cool.
Ms. Hines Ortiz class wants to know, does the grafting tape disappear or do you have to take it off?
That's a good question. I would say because it's plastic, it probably has to come off. Here we're down to some new trees I just planted a couple weeks ago. This is how they come to me. This is called a whip. It's one single stem. So you can see down here is where the graft was. This was the stem. This was where they cut the stem and put the bud on there and wrapped it up, and it grafted together and has become one tree. So, but that's a good question. I don't know. They used to use wax as a coating around it, which would just wear off. I don't know if this plastic is biodegradable or not. That's a good question. I like that. So down here, you can see these, the single stems. These are a year older, a little bit older tree, and you can see how they've started to branch out. So all those whips that I put in will do this year. It will get these branches coming out of them. So this is the start of a new tree, and it will take 3, maybe 4 years before they're starting to bear apples. And if they do get apples before that, we always take them off because we want the tree to put its energy into making a stronger tree before we start producing fruit.
So we're getting some questions from Miss Odell's kindergarten class, and they want to know about animals. What can you tell us about animals on your farm? Do you have any?
Yeah. I've got a whole variety of animals on my farm. Some of them are producing and working. Others are somewhat my pets. I've got a couple of horses. And straight ahead is Mr. Beamer. He's a Palomino quarter horse, and Maud is my other Palomino quarter horse, although they're very muddy horses right now because it's muddy out here. I have some mini donkeys and a standard donkey and some alpacas on the farm. Hi, Beamer. What's up, bud? Now, a little bit of a education to you guys. If you're ever on a farm and you see a wire fence, oh, there's Barney. Can you hear Barney over there?
I could hear Barney, yes.
So we have a wire fence around our pastures, and this is electrified. Right now it's turned off. But if you're ever on a farm and you see a wire fence like this, always assume it is on. Because if it's on and you touch it, you will get a shock and it hurts. So never touch it. We have shut it off because we know we're going inside and we want to see the critters. So we'll see if we can bring Beamer over. You want some food, buddy? Yes. So I use the horses for riding. They're a little bit of my sanity control. I love them. I've always been in love with horses. So we've got them. I've got the donkeys. I got Barney because I thought how fun to have a donkey, so I bought him. Actually, donkeys are used for guard animals in goat herds and sheep herds because they dislike canines. So they will chase out coyotes. I've actually seen him chase 2 coyotes out of the field before. So they're good for guard and protection because the alpacas, on the other hand, in the wild are animals of prey, meaning they'll be hunted and they don't have a lot of defenses. So I feel confident with Barney and my miniature donkeys out here in the field because they will keep an eye out. They're always on guard. They see everything that comes in. Now, I also have the alpacas. I saw a baby and I fell in love, so I said I have to have one. And that led to 13 of them. So I think they're just very serene, wonderful animals. And I love the fiber that they give off. So you all got a sample of raw fiber and some yarn. Here, we'll take a quick visit to Barney. Hello, Barney. Yes, I do apologize. It is mud season, so none of them are clean. I like when there's snow on the ground because everybody stays clean. Right, buddy? So the alpacas we use for their fiber, they get sheared once a year, usually in late May. And we send some of their best fiber off to be made into yarn, which you've got a sample of the yarn. And then we also send a lot of their fiber to a fiber pool. Emmy, come here, Em.
That
Let's see
got
if
their
we can get him to come
attention.
over. Oh, here comes Tori. Yes, she
What are
loves
you
food.
shaking there, Miss Julie? What's getting them
This is
excited?
some of their food. They eat mostly grass and hay, but we supplement them with this food because this has some of the vitamins that they need and may not get from out without being able to go out and forage in the wild and eat all sorts of stuff. So this gives them some essential vitamins. So we shear them. After they're sheared, we call them our stick children because they're very skinny. They have a lot of thick fur on them. Their fur is about 3 inches long. And we get that made into different products like socks, gloves, hats, scarves. And it is very insulating, it's very warm, and it's very soft. Hello, Tori. Would you like some? There you go. So they are a member of the camelid family. They're related to camels and llamas. They're smaller than llamas, and they have softer fiber fur than llamas. This is Tori. This is Emmy. This is her mom, mama and daughter. So I just think they're cool, and I love their products that they produce.
Do
So
you
we have them
wear
here on the
any of
farm.
those, any alpaca products? Do you wear
I
any?
I wear socks year round. Actually, I have a pair of socks with me coming from the fiber pool. This is a summer pair of socks that we have on that we sell that are a thin pair, and then I have various thicker pairs that are just so warm and soft. They're just wonderful.
And even in
And
the
the black,
summer, you
great.
would wear those in the summer too?
Oh yeah, yes, because alpaca also breathes very well, so it wicks a lot of moisture away from your skin and is very comfortable. So I wear those thinner ones like I showed you year round. And then I've got thick ones that I'll wear in the wintertime. If you can, I don't know if you can see her eat, but their top lip is split. So they almost act like fingers to eat the food out of my hand. And another kind of interesting fact, alpacas, like goats, don't have any front top teeth, just bottom teeth. Yes, is that good, Em? Yes. Okay.
Chase from Mrs. Shell's fourth grade class wants to know if there was a storm, what do the animals do?
They all have shelters. I don't know if you can see with the camera way down there is their barn. They all have individual run-ins that they can get out of the weather if they need to. But one thing with alpacas, because their fiber is so warm and insulating, they sit outside during snowstorms and the snow just piles up on their backs. They get up and they shake it off. It doesn't even melt. So they come from Peru, high up in the Andes. So they have evolved to be around really cold weather. And we shear them for two reasons. We want to do it for their fiber, but we do it in early summer so then they're more comfortable in the summertime. And then they grow it all back for the next year.
And do you shear them yourself?
I do not. I could, but it would take me forever. I hire a guy who can do an animal in about 5 minutes and he'll be done. So it puts a lot less stress on the animals. I can get them all done in 2 hours and on to something else. So I leave the work of the professionals to those who are really good at it for certain things. But we also, I don't know if you can tell on their feet, they do not have hooves like a horse. They have toes. And those nails coming out, they're actually like nails. They have a soft pad underneath and the nail on the top. So a goat has a cloven hoof. A cow has a cloven hoof, meaning two hooves that make up the one. A horse has one. These guys actually have toes and a soft pad underneath.
Macaulay wants to know, do the animals ever eat your apples or your young trees or anything else you grow on the farm?
Everybody loves the apples. Fall time, yeah, they're eating apples almost every day. I'll bring in a big bucket full and then I chop them up for these guys. The horses, I'll just give a whole apple or two. And yeah, they get lots of treats that time of year. They love them. They also love, the alpacas actually love pears and carrots. And the horses included also love sweet potatoes.
Very interesting.
Come here, yo. Yes, you got to come over. There you go, Barney.
So I'm
That's
going
my
to
donkey.
rapid fire some questions from you. And then could be almost anything. We've gotten some really good questions from our students. So Mrs. Garrison's class wants to know, on average, about how many apples do your trees produce? Might one tree produce a year in apples?
Oh, it all depends on the age of the tree. They could produce from a bushel of apples to 3 or 4 bushels of apples per tree. It depends on the size and the age of the tree.
And Mrs. Humphrey's class wants to know, how long does it take to grow an apple?
It takes about 3 years before they start producing, and they'll have a new crop every year, and they can live for 30, 40 years.
We have a question about what kind of pests do you have on your farm that you have to take precautions against?
Pests.
Pests, Pests. Yep.
Okay. The biggest problem we have out here is deer, because they will come and eat on the apple tree or the Christmas trees if it's really a bad winter. They get their fair share of the apples. I don't worry about that. But they will nibble on the young trees, so we have to put some protection on the young trees. Other than that, there's not a lot of problems with pests out here. We have occasional woodchuck holes, but we have to deal with them.
So we have some questions about here's a fun one. How many tractors do you have? Take on two.
I have 2 John Deere tractors, the excavator, and we have mowers. We have 3 mowers out here because there's a lot of mowing to do. And we have a big backhoe on the property that does the larger projects. So yeah, when you have a big farm, you slowly accumulate toys. We call them toys, but they're equipment that make our life a lot easier.
Well, I think this is a great question to end on today. We've been at your farm in the winter season, and now we've been at your farm in the spring season. So we know that a farmer's job never ends. There's always something happening throughout the year. And we have our last question is, do you have a favorite season?
Winter, because I take winters off. Once Christmas is done and we're done Christmas trees, the pruning doesn't usually start till March. And so I get a couple months to go ski and have fun. And what you're seeing now, all this, where this is a new area in progress. This is going to be a future playground and pumpkin patch. We just finished clearing an area. So that's a big area, a lot of work in progress out there. So the more area you have, you always get new projects to undertake.
How exciting. Always new
Yeah.
additions, new things when we come to visit you. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Miss Julie, for having us on your farm. Thank you to our students across the state who tuned in today. We are really grateful to have you with us.
Well, thanks so much for coming out. And if you're in the area and close by, come out and see us in apple season or Christmas time. We'd love to see you, and be sure you tell us that you saw us on this program. This is
Oh,
awesome.
wonderful. Thanks, Miss Julie. Have a great day. Bye,
You
everyone.
too. So long.